Hello and welcome to Divisive Issues, a foul-mouthed, spoiler-filled comic book podcast where we talk about controversial, silly, and sometimes interesting comic books and comic book history. I'm Sly.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Darryl.
And I just want to say, I don't think we've ever mentioned this at the top of the show. If you're new, Phil and Darryl hate comics.
Yeah.
I don't hate them. These ones we read for this week I do hate.
That's what's funny. It's like, we don't hate them, but like these were some of the worst we've read.
not just the worst comics, like the worst words and pictures I've ever looked at. Like I really hated this.
But we never mentioned that like Sly and I love comics and Phil and Darryl tolerate them.
Tolerate's
pretty
good. That's good.
Okay, so Sly had this idea. What was this idea?
Ryan had it too. I forget. I think he brought it first, and I don't know. Whatever the fuck. One of us came up with this idea of talking about how Stanley in comics, how he's portrayed in comics.
Who's Stanley?
Good question.
What's a comic?
Who am I? Explain the reality.
Yeah. What can we truly know?
Totally equivalent questions.
Well, if you know anything about, if you're listening to a podcast called Divisive Issues, don't know who Stanley is, you should, I don't know.
You really wanted to say fuck off, didn't you?
He's that old guy that shows up in every fucking Marvel movie.
Yeah, so Stanley, he was one of the biggest creators in Marvel. He co-created Spider-Man.
Just about everybody.
Doctor Strange, yeah, like almost like a lot of the ones in the films you see. Like a lot of the film Marvel Universe, the cinematic universe stuff is going to stuff that Stanley created specifically, in like the order he created them almost. Everyone has the image of Stanley as his great granddaddy who created comic books. He's like, it's one of those things where never meet the people you idolize because they're bad people in real life most of the time, as evidenced by the Me Too movement and all that shit. Because everyone loves Stanley because of like the way he's portrayed in the media and stuff like that. But everyone that worked with Stanley fucking hated him, as evidenced by these comics. So we're gonna get into that, like how Stanley was portrayed in comic books by the people he worked with.
So just like in the movies, he cameos in books sometimes, but unlike the movies, he's not just like, hey, I'm fun, hi. It's usually like, fuck this guy.
I'm going to steal your ideas, and I'm going to put my name on it kind of shit. Like,
so one of the main things about Stanley, and Stanley's really one of my favorite comic creators of all time, and has written some of my all-time favorite books ever. But he was like most comic book creators were not businessmen, and he was like, I'm gonna basically get credit for everything. There's a reason why when you get a Marvel book, it still says Stanley Presents on it. Even though he hasn't really written a book regularly in decades. It's just, he just like owns everything. And most of the artists that he worked with, which also created stuff, would be like, no, this is mine. And he'd be like, nope, it's mine, fuck you. You didn't sign the right contracts.
And we should note that the Marvel method that Stanley really wrote under was it was called the Marvel method because it was like when Marvel first came out, like this is how all the comics were in. Stanley will give a pitch to an artist. The artist would then draw out the issue, and Stanley will write the words afterwards. So basically, the artists were in charge of plotting it, the designs, and like 80% of the stories.
That's why like the writing in those comics, at least from the few we've read of Stanley, just feel like superfluous.
They were after the fact.
Yeah, it's just like, it's kind of like commentary most of the time rather than driving the narrative. Like there's no thing of like someone reacting like to what someone's saying. Usually.
Yeah, because it's always like apparently the way it's created, it could exist totally without the words.
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons why when you compare Silver Age Marvel and DC, Marvel was much more dynamic and art-oriented, because you would see, like, Gene Colan or Jack Kirby doing these, like, dynamic shots, because they were telling the story first, and then Stan would go in and pepper things himself. Now, I don't want to discredit, though, because when you look at, like, characters like Spider-Man or, you know, like the Fantastic Four, a lot of times it is the dialogue that makes you love these characters. So I don't want to say that Stanley did nothing.
But we should clarify that Stanley, like what we said before, but Marvel was the first time that like teams actually fought against each other and they bickered and stuff like that, and that was a lot of Stanley's doing.
It's really the first time comic book characters had personalities. Yeah,
before they're all like, I'm heroic, I'm going to save the day, basically.
Yeah, they're like virtuous figures from like mythology kind of a thing.
Yes,
just one note.
Yeah, so and I agree with Ryan that Stanley. Like I like a lot of the stuff from the '60s I read from him. Like they're just fun to read, especially for the time. But it is noteworthy that a lot of these writers, the artists that he worked with, went on to do better stuff than the stuff they would do with Stanley, while Stanley pretty much went to shit after he stopped like writing in the 60s. Like by the 80s, he was writing shit like Nightcap about a pop star who becomes a superhero by night.
Didn't he do Stripperella at one point?
I think so. He did Stripperella, yes. Like it's very telling the creators he worked with, like the artists he worked with, went on to basically create the Marvel universe, create the DC universe, like the Galaxy, the stuff that's being adapted now for like the Justice League movie, for like the Guardians of the Galaxy, Infinity War.
Yeah.
They're telling you that they created that stuff while Stanley kind of deteriorated as a writer over time. So
yeah, like Stanley kind of peaked in like the late 60s, where like Steve Ditko went on to create like the Blue Beetle and the Question we've covered before, and like Jack Kirby went on to create a million characters, and he also did the Herculoids. That's cool.
Hey, I used to watch that when I was a kid.
Didn't you do Guardian?
Oh, yeah. He did create Guardian. After
Well, he
lost rights.
created Guardian like in the 40s.
That's
Yeah,
even
but-
better.
Yeah.
But he created Guardian because he originally created Captain America, but he lost the rights to Captain America, so he created Guardian after.
That's also when he created Fighting American, who's exactly what he sounds like.
Yeah. He created a lot of Captain Americas because he wanted those rights back, but he couldn't get them back. He's like, shit.
Couldn't he just be like Sergeant USA or something?
Well, that's what Fighting American was, basically.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's get into the actual stories, or at least we're gonna kind of abridge them because they're fucking crazy. These stories were
They're more than just crazy, because we've read a lot of crazy stories on the show. They were like impossible to read. Like I really I couldn't get through them. I was like, I'm just gonna not be on this episode because I can't read these comics.
Yeah, so this is a conundrum we came into because all these stories happen in the middle of larger runs. Basically, all these artists, after they quit working for Stanley, were like, let's create these big, expansive universes, create all these characters come together. So basically, they were creating...
And this was before, like, you would buy trades. Like, it was before collected editions existed. So it was really, like, there was no... Nobody was making things that were accessible at this point for some reason.
And on top of that, they're throwing in jabs at their former boss.
It's the Wild West out there.
People now complain about Infinity War being hard to follow if you don't follow the other Marvel films. Imagine Infinity War written by... like a comic nerd who expects you to follow his comic nerdom fanfic as he's like 20 chapters into it already.
Yeah.
Like Infinity War is like people bitch about Infinity War. Infinity War is more comic books than all the other comic book films we have so far.
Imagine if every 10 minutes in Infinity War somebody was like, hope you saw this other movie that came out last week.
Yeah, but the first comic isn't actually that. It's a comic that is pretty much exactly what it is. So you can judge it for what it is. It's called The Angel and the Ape. Angel and the Ape was created in 1968. It was created by Nelson Birdwell and drawn by comic artist Bob Oksner. Nelson Birdwell is noteworthy because he worked for Mad Magazine at one point, which is very telling for what the kind of story this is.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and the artist, Bob Oksner, I don't know if Ryan knows him, probably not.
I don't. I did see Wally Wood in the credits. He worked with Stan Lee. He created Stiltman.
Bob Oksner co-created Marvel Boy back before, back before Stanley was Stanley. And I should know. I wish I had this fucking book, but in the 90s, one of the first experience I had with indie books was a dictionary, not dictionary. It was, I don't know what you call it, a history book on the growth of indie books over the decades, and it was written in the 90s.
Like an encyclopedia?
It was like a narrative. There was interviews and stuff like that.
Oh,
It was, like,
okay.
explain
That's
what
cool.
these books were, so I don't know what the fuck.
Yeah, a dictionary.
I'm sorry. I don't know how the words work. Okay, but I need a dictionary, right? Hi, guys. But basically, I don't know. I wish I knew who the creator was, but it was the creator who directly worked on Stan Lee, and he basically talked about how Stan Lee was the shittiest fucking writer ever. He hated him. he took credit for all his work, and basically he quit comics just because of Stanley. He's like, fuck this guy, fuck this medium. And but by the 60s, when Stanley really started getting big, that's when Stanley created like Spider-Man and like all the characters you know. He basically said when he saw Stanley was getting big now after knowing him just as a shit that he worked with, he was like, of course comics are trash, of course Stanley will become big in this medium, fuck comics. I really wish I remember who that was.
Sly, this sounds like just you.
It's funny because like this is like a common story, like Bill Gates, but he also didn't do that all himself. He had what's his name with him.
The
fact that you don't know kind of like
Drive someone home. Even with like Facebook.
Yep. Or
Steve
Edison
Jobs had
and
Steve Wozniak.
Tesla.
Yep.
Yeah, Wozniak.
I think when you, not to get all political, but in a capitalist society, it favors the people that are cutthroat.
And people, and because one name is easier to like.
Yeah. The publicity
to
man.
stand out.
The publicity man's always one
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
And that's the thing is Stan Lee brought the personality to Marvel. One of the reasons why people, like why college kids started loving Marvel in the 60s is because there was all these like in-jokes, where like editorial notes would be like, oh, what, you didn't read this book, instead of just like, see Green Lantern number 22. So like it was more like tongue-in-cheek. And then, like, they would even have, like, the Marvel bullpen where Stanley would narrate, like, look at all the artists and show, like, their pictures. So he was the first, like, comic book celebrity.
And he would also show up in, like, the... Whenever they talk about it in, like, the news or media and cartoons, like, he would put himself in the stories himself sometimes, too. Like,
I mean, he's in every single Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, too.
Yeah,
that's
like definitive Stan Lee right there, that example.
And we'll get to this a bit, but that's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Even the complaints you might have about them being too much the same are complaints that people levied against Stanley in the way he wrote his comics. And so it's funny how much the movies reflect comics Stanley created, excluding the fact that Stanley will always show up in them and publicize himself in them. But yeah, Angel and the Ape was Bob Oksner was the artist for this, and it's very telling because the comic strip is about a woman. I forgot the character's names, but let's just call him Angel and Ape.
She's a dame.
Yeah, and he's an
that
ape.
hot blonde lady that gets captured.
Wait, we have to say his name. Sam Simeon. Come on.
Sam Simeon. I will say I really love Oxner's art. The way he draws Angel is actually really like I like the way he draws her. I like the it's very 60s to me. Like this.
It kind of reminded me of like old Hanna-Barbera, kind of.
It does in a lot of ways. Yeah.
There's a lot of
I like
action
that
and
style.
movement in it, and especially like even drawing like a policeman. There's a lot of flourish to it, I think.
And very expressive faces. Like
like
whenever people get knocked to the head, they go cross-eyed and go make goofy faces and stuff like that.
Yeah, cartoony.
It's very cartoony. Yeah. So the plot is there's a cartoonist gorilla. He's basically a being forced to work for a slave driver, Stan Bragg, who is an analogy. I wonder who he is.
This was the most naked like criticism of Stan. Like it's the other ones try and hide it a little bit by being like, oh, he's like this thing, or he's a con man. But over here, it's just like a comic book editor that just constantly talks about how great he is.
But it's telling that the artist that Stanley worked with before he became big talks about how Stanley was a stage driver in this comic. So, but yeah. So and while this cartoonist gorilla is being slave driven by Stanley, he has a private detective roommate who's trying to stop a circus criminal group called the Bikinis, and that's basically the plot of it.
It's so fucking bizarre to read this because they're performing this heist and it's just like. They're hypnotizing the police officers, and then they have acrobats taking all the money out, and
and like in the same like when I said this reminds me of the 60s very much. This was very much like the type of like if you watch like the 60s Batman cartoon, there was like a very campy nature to that era, a very colorful nature to that era, and this kind of embodies it to it because like embodies that. It's like very
especially this first panel, this big splash page, everything going on. It's so wacky is the
you have guy Stilton stealing stuff from the second floor. The trapeze artist.
Yeah, big strong man ripping off like a vault thing, but he does it at such an angle that it's like coming out of the building. It's very like it's captivating in a way.
Yeah, and so the angel calls the ape saying, they're performing the greatest heist in history. And the ape is busy cartooning, saying, "Well, I guess I gotta go save Angel because he gets kidnapped while she's making the phone call." Mm-hmm. And one joke in this comic is that everyone sees the ape as an ape in a suit, but they can't rationalize it's an ape in a suit. So they all think, "Wow, that guy's really hairy." So like as he's swinging from the fucking phone lines, everyone's like, "That guy's swinging from the phone lines." These hip youngsters disregarding all the rules and shit. But yeah, the ape comes and he tries to fight him off, but they're too much for him, so they kidnap the angel. And the ape has to go back, and he has to go back anyway because his boss, Stan Bragg, is asking for his new cartoons. Yeah. And one thing that happens whenever he goes to hand in his new cartoons is the Stan Bragg literally puts him in a cage and like starts mocking him, saying, "I'm gonna steal your cartoons, you piece of shit!" Stan Bragg, look again, haha. And basically, the ape finally breaks free from his prison.
Yeah, at one point, he makes a joke that really actually made me laugh, where he was like, "What, you don't like me? I appreciate your work enough to put my name on it."
Yeah. and by the way, this was in the first issue, which I read to set up for this issue to get the gist of the premise. He actually writes his name on the cartoons themselves, and when he writes it, it's so Stanley, like presenting the greatest comic ever made, like Stanley, the stupendous Stanley, the maker of all great comics. Like if you read a 60s comic, every single Stanley comic is him jerking himself off in the editor boxes.
And in this one, he's holding up a side editor tube by the ear, and he's saying, "Let's hear it for Stan." And he's like, "Yeah, stupendous, ouch, fantastic, ouch, Stan."
Yeah, and also I should mention he has an assistant who's like jerking. He's also like his like
it's brown noser. He's just got his face up his butt. Yeah.
And I don't know, because later on it will be an allusion to Roy Thomas, his successor editor at DC. I don't know if this guy is, but he is a big kiss ass. I mean, probably Stanley had kiss asses around the entire career, knowing him. But yeah, so this guy's probably could be allusion to anyone. But he has this guy kissing his ass, saying, "You should be proud that Stanley's ripping off your stuff." And then, but the ape gets pissed off and he breaks out of the cage and he draws on Stanley's face saying, "I quit," quitting the job. And as he's swinging from the tougher lines, he's singing "Born Free, Free as the Dum Dum," which I don't know if that's a song. Free as a Dum Dum.
I think it's free as a bird.
Yeah, I think so too.
But here he calls it Dum Dum.
So he's a gorilla. I don't know.
But anyway, he figures that the circus.
It's free as the wind blows. Whatever that song is.
Whatever. He fucked up the lines, not me. I'm reading what the page says. But anyway, he figures that the circus.
I don't make the rules. I just work here.
He figures that the circus criminals actually work at the circus. So he goes to the circus, the Dingaling Brothers Circus, and they capture the net. And he's so used to being captured by nets and cages by Stan Bragg that he thinks it's Stan Bragg capturing, saying, "Well, this is an elaborate heist that Stan Bragg's doing." As the circus act starts putting him in the cage and like carrying him away off to the circus, like he thinks like, "Oh, Stan Bragg's really going far this time." Like usually he just kidnapped me for like a day. Now he's like taking me off to the circus and stuff. He figures that Angel has to be somewhere, so he breaks free from his confines and he goes. And the whole time he's wondering like. Because these guys existed before, they're called the bikini circus, but they can never work together. They always work separately. And he's like, how do they come together? Like usually they hate each other. And he found out that the whole mastermind behind this was an evil family counselor.
I thought that was so funny. And he's always like, my counseling for you is kill the gorilla.
Yeah. So Angel breaks free from the counselor, beats his ass as the ape breaks in, and the two have to escape because the bikini circus is too much for them. And so Ape is like, I gotta get a new job, so I'm going to work for DZ Comics. I hope I fit in. And luckily for him, it turns out that the editor is also a gorilla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like that the editor's a male gorilla and everyone else there's just women that work there too. Yeah. Like, ooh, an ape.
I think it's just, they're like, oh, what? And then it's funny because the editor's a gorilla, but they're still surprised that a gorilla comes in anyway. And the both of them are thinking as they enter and sing, I like his looks, there's something familiar about him. But anyway.
I don't even think the editor's a gorilla. I think he's gorilla-like.
Yeah. But he when I say he's gorilla, like he actually is what everyone thinks the ape is supposed to be, like a really hairy, weird guy.
Yeah, ape man. Yeah.
Yeah, ape-like. But anyway, the DC editor and him get off. Get along well together. Hit it off. I meant to say.
We'll make $1 million and we'll kill Stan Bragg.
Yeah. The ape is like, finally, everything's coming up my way, but he comes back. He gets called back to Stan Bragg's office, and Stan Bragg is out faking his death, and his kiss has to say, "You killed Stan Bragg when you beat him up and wrote your name. Well, I quit on him, you monster. If you don't want me to tell the police about this, you better work for me for free forever.
Yeah,
you're our slave now. This is subtle commentary that I want you to be our slave." At Marvel Comics,
it's not subtle. He's like, I'm I guess I'm a slave now.
That's the joke.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Funny thing about this and the other one is Stanley was like a notorious sexist, and like Angel and the female character later on, they're actually proactive women. Because here the Angel is like, I gotta take down this fucking gang. So she calls up the police saying, "Hey, police, come to this location, and it's the location where Stan Bragg is." Saying Stan Bragg is probably trying to make him a slave. So I'm gonna call police. Yeah.
Literally succeed and capture these people. I was blown away reading this. I'm like, you got a guy with an axe cutting off the guy on the stilts. You got like.
Wait, let me set up. Let me set up first. So the setup is she thinks that Stan Bragg is making the ape a slave again. So she calls the police over to Stan Bragg's office saying the bikini guys are there. So to make sure the bikini guys are there, she goes up to the bikini guys saying, "Hey, you guys suck," and drives over to...
No, she says, "You're all wet."
You're all wet. She drives over to the Stan Bragg's place, and this sets up...
It sets up all the police taking down the bikini clowns. Like, the guy on stilts is getting his legs cut off while the police...
No, his stilts cut off.
That's legs. It's not fucking rated R.
You get a bunch of people police stacking up to fight stacked up men.
That was my favorite part of this whole comic. There were 3 police on each other's shoulders fighting those 3 guys on each other's shoulders.
Yeah, with their batons.
And so because like this is like, why not just call police to handle your problems for you? So the police just beat the shit out of the bad guys. And so meanwhile, Stan Bragg's like, "What the fuck is going on out there?" So he gets up from because he was like lying down on like in rest in peace, like
on a table,
on an open casket, kind of like an open casket kind of thing. So he gets out of his place like, "What the fuck is going on?" And the ape at the same time, Ape comes in to hand in his comic, and he's like, "Oh shit, you fucking set me up." So he starts beating the shit out of Stan Bragg, and the police come in just as this is happening. So the Ape gets an idea. So he starts pretending that Stan Bragg is choking him, forcing Stan Bragg's hands onto his neck, and he pretends that Stan Bragg is overpowering him, saying, "Oh no, stop choking me!" And he jumps out the window, pretending Stan Bragg threw him off.
And as the best joke in all of these comics that I read about, the cop sees him and he's like, "It's against the law to choke anybody." And then as he's falling out the window, he's like, "You're pushing him out the window. Now you're breaking lots of laws." And then as he falls, the cop goes, "You did it. Now you broke all the laws."
Yeah,
that was really funny. Honestly, this was the best comic of the ones we read.
Yeah, I love it. What's the most? Like I said, it's the most. It is what it is. Like it's supposed to be like fucking goofy shit. And the police take Matt Stanley away because he starts going raving mad, saying, "He's not dead. I'm dead. He killed me. Like I'm the one that's actually dead. You guys should be arrested again." And the police are like, "He's fucking crazy." And the end it ends with Stan, the Ape, and Angel going to get a banana ice cream while Stan Bragg is in his. In a mental hospital, swearing revenge on the Ape, and that's the end of the issue.
What a thing that was.
Yeah, I that one was pretty funny. I will say that. Like, and it is like it wasn't as confusing as some of the other ones we read, and it was cheesy, but like it was like okay with it. Like it went with it.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a goofy 60s. Like a lot of the books these released that were new at the time were all like really 60s. Goofy comic books. Like one comic was called Prez, which is about a teenager becomes president and stuff like that.
It really is like a meld between like DC and Mad.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Yeah. So I don't think I need to go into the nuances of this depiction of Stanley, but I will have to explain. Like Phil said, I was the only one that explains what it is up front, pretty much.
I actually read some of these others and had to ask, like, where was Stan Lee in that comic? Like, I read it and I didn't know what I just read.
So can I give a little bit of backstory on Fourth
Yes.
World?
Yeah, you know the most about it anyway.
Okay, so Jack Kirby is often called the King of Comics, and he co-created most of Marvel with Stan Lee, and he pushed the medium further than like anybody, like pretty much for like decades. Every time Jack Kirby would do something, it was usually groundbreaking, and he moved to DC in the like late 60s, early 70s, and it was like a huge deal. That would be like if Stan Lee moved to DC. And they gave him...
It's like if Shigeru Miyamoto started working for Konami or some shit like that. Like it's like
Sony.
He was like it's huge. Like that he was so pissed off with Marvel that he wanted to quit.
Yeah. And DC gave him Jimmy Olsen as a book to write. And
a book worthy of his prestige.
Yes. And they basically... Jack Kirby was like, give me your lowest selling book, because I want to be able to just do crazy shit to it. So they were like, here, take Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. So Jack Kirby started creating this whole huge mythology in Jimmy Olsen, and then they just kept giving him more and more books. And Kirby was writing and drawing, and so he was writing and penciling. I think he was doing 10 pages a week, which usually a 20-page comic comes out every month. And all of a sudden, he was publishing 4 books at a time, which was Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, The New Gods, The Forever People, and Mr. Miracle.
Writing and drawing 4 books, like that's fucking insane.
Yeah, and it was this huge... It was the most epic, giant story, and I use epic in the classical sense, that comics had ever had.
Yeah. We should clarify. So, what DC is building towards with the Justice League films, that's all Jack Kirby's story.
Yeah.
And when Marvel is Thanos, all the stuff that Marvel's adapting, that was Marvel aping what Jack Kirby did at DC. Marvel saw what DC was doing, what Jack Kirby was doing at DC, and Marvel says we can't fall behind. We have to rip off Jack Kirby. We have to create Thanos to match Darkseid, etc., etc.
Yeah. So the thing is, these books, when I first read Jack Kirby's Fourth World, it was one of those things that it's a massive run, and the whole time I was like, I don't understand any of this shit, but it's like blowing my mind, and a lot of the dialogue is like super dated, but he's throwing like so many concepts where it's like, this is like this long mythology that's been building for thousands of years and all these crazy things. The only thing is, it is impossible to read in pieces. Yes. And like, I don't understand how, like, because DC collects this often as like just the Mr. Miracle stuff or just the New God stuff. And that blows my mind at all. Like, so when Sly was like, let's do this one Mr. Miracle issue, I was like, that's gonna be something.
I should clarify, when we were talking about this, I was thinking maybe we shouldn't do this at all because I read the Mr. America issue like, wow. I read the fucking next issue we're going to talk about, and I was like, wow, we can't do any of these because they're all part of massive. Basically, whenever one person was doing well at DC or part of the big story arc, they decided to dedicate one issue saying, "Fuck you, Stanley."
So. This is Mr. Miracle number 6, written and drawn by Jack Kirby, and it's just in the middle of this fucking bonkers shit.
Yeah, and it's called Funky Flashman, named after the main thrust of the story, Funky Flashman. Mm-hmm. So we should mention, like, if you read any '60s Marvel stuff, you know Jack Kirby's art style. It's very like it's '60s Marvel. Like he created that art style. It's him. Just go look up 60 Marvel and you'll see, okay, that's how Jack Kirby draws.
Yeah, so the main premise of the Mr. Miracle book is Mr. Miracle was... there's 2 planets in the fourth world. There's the good place and the bad place. Mr. Miracle was the son of the good place, like the king of the good place, and he was given up to Darkseid, the big evil guy, of which he learned to be a master escape artist, and then he escaped and came to Earth.
His name's Scott-Free, this escape artist.
Yeah, because he gets off scot-free. So he is a super escape artist that is now in show business while he gets chased by the bad guys.
God, I hate this book.
Yeah, me too. This was like, honestly, the worst. Like I said, all these were the worst thing I've ever read. Like this one in particular was the worst thing I've ever read.
Here, I will back you up, Phil. I think this is the worst thing I have ever read in my life.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, I'm not good. Thank God someone else agrees with me.
I love this book.
I love this
We've
book,
read worse material. We've read like worse like things like more sexist stuff, more racist stuff, more just like disrespectful and gross and nasty. Jack Kirby does not respect punctuation at all, and it drives me mad, and I hate it because like it's him throwing prose away because he does not use a single period throughout this whole comic, and I assume like his other things. It's only exclamation points, and it's really rapid, and they're not broken up, and it like so much of it is writing, and I can't read it because it's so like scatterbrained and crazy. I'm gonna read like this is just like one panel. It's someone saying, "Oh yes, you've been hinting about going on tour. Well, why not? It's time we began making money." And then someone says, "Touring means being constantly on the move, Oberon. That's what's important. We must become mobile." And then it like the whole comic is like that. It's just like short, punchy sentences that makes it hard to know what's going on because they don't feel like interconnected with each other. It's just like people saying like, "Oh yes, Oberon, Earth weapons, primitive on Apocalypse, but effective here, easy to handle too." That's another line.
That kind of makes me like him more because that makes it feel more like a traditional comic book. Like every book sentence, ending of a question, exclamation point, is very comic booky.
I just flipped through it. Daryl's right. There's not a single period.
Yeah, actually isn't. Yeah, he's right.
And like we said, Jack Kirby was like this happens a lot. Like go read Batman Odyssey to see another artist writer.
You're completely right because after this, I was thinking about the other comics that we were reading, and it's like the other 61s, like the Adam Warlock one and the Ape one. They only use periods as ellipses too, but it's like it's a single exclamation point and it doesn't break up in the middle of the sentence. Over this, I went mad reading this. It's 24 pages. There's 220 narration bubbles and boxes, and 740 exclamation points. That's 30 per page.
It is pretty crazy.
And then I was like, am I going mad? Like, is that allowed or not? So then I looked up per 100,000 words. How do these authors use exclamation points? J.K. Rowling per 100,000 words uses 600 exclamation points. Ernest Hemingway uses 60. J.R.R. Tolkien and James Joyce both use 1,000, which is like, okay, sure. And they've been like, it's been said they use a lot.
Those are all prose writers. They were not writing for punchy combo dialogue.
But that's the
also,
thing.
Also, he breaks it up. Sometimes he uses 1, sometimes he uses 2, and sometimes he uses 3.
Yeah, and then I was thinking to myself, I'm like, maybe I'm thinking about this too much because some of these can just be normal periods, but he uses the double one way too much too. Like,
no, but the thing is, it's hard to read some of these sentences like they're all saying.
Yeah.
Like, if it's 2 words, exclamation point, 2 words, exclamation point, like, suddenly her senses spring to the alert. The room is full of shadows, and in their depths, danger.
Yeah.
Or that sound. My side clip warning are reacting. Could be a carrier beam. Then it stops. from Apocalypse.
That's so funny that you mentioned that, because when I read Fourth World, it felt like a fever dream when I read the whole thing for the first time. And I remember finishing it and being like, what the fuck did I just read? And then like I reread it like over the years and like I appreciate it a lot more. But I think that adds to it where you never take a breath. Even when they're just like having dinner, you're like I feel like my heart's gonna explode.
Yeah, everyone speaks with the same urgency.
That's what I love about it. That's like,
go to hell.
You never have a... Fuck you, Darryl. Seriously, you're like you're fucking restricted, closed-minded views on.
No, I'm fine. Like
you're gonna fucking go to fucking J.K. Rowling. Oh, this is the rules for how you write.
I can understand. I can understand it with stuff like, again, when we get into Adam Warlock, that's just how you write punchy. But he is too punchy for me.
That's what's funny. That's very interesting to me because he's an artist turned writer. He talked purely through art for most of his career, and now all of his art, like the thing that made Jack Kirby stand out was his punchy art. Like, if you compare it to like that fucking Superman comic we read for the bonus episode for Patreon, the panels like punch out every the punches and throws, everything just explodes out of the page.
It is kind of like similar to his art in that it's like it can be overwhelming at times, and I do appreciate that like artistically. On the page itself, like I've always liked the Jack Kirby machines. Those are always cool.
I will say that like interesting doesn't mean it's not unreadable. Like this is almost impossible to read. Like I couldn't fucking read this.
That's how I felt.
Yeah, but that's totally fair. But like I think I'm trying to defend like this as an interesting specimen. Like this was like an artist going full out into his craft. Like that's what the whole entire. That's why the reason why this made such a big impact. Because this was a master craftsman, a master of the '60s. Super obvious, super blunt art style, and like action scenes and explosions and all that shit. Just trying to write a story and doing whatever the fuck he wants. Like these books weren't selling anyway. He had fucking full reign. So
See,
like,
I don't think those are incongruous concepts because
no, they're not.
I've always wanted to do Fourth World for the show since like once Phil and Darryl joined, I was like, we should do Fourth World, but it is impossible to cover in our format. There is no way we can ever do it, and. One of the reasons why is because I feel like if I gave this to someone that wasn't like in it, like wasn't in for this ride, they would fucking despise it.
Like me and Phil weren't prepared for this.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't get too mad, but I because like this stuff is
you get like defensive of the masters and the pioneers of comics.
Yeah. This is a lot like getting to Silmarillion and like if you're a Hobbit fan.
I think that's a very fair comparison, and that's coming from someone who could barely finish the Silmarillion.
But so the issue opens up with narration in the shadow world between success and failure. There's like the driven little man who dreams of having it all, the opportunistic spoiler without character or values, who prays on all things like a cannibal, including you. So keep in mind, this is the co-creator, the guy that Stanley co-created is Hulk, Fantastic Four, the X-Men, Thor, Iron Man, all these characters. This is how he describes Stan Lee. This fucking leech, this scumbeard.
A cannibal.
And he's introducing the character, the Funky Flash Man, which is a very interesting name for a character. Yeah. And his sidekick, Housefly, who is transparently Roy Thomas, Stanley's successor at DC, at Marvel.
That's pretty funny. I didn't know that. Like I didn't even know he was fucking Stanley when I was reading this. I'm like, what is going on? And no, when I reflect now, I'm like, a lot of it must have been just the writing because I felt like I hated the story too. But like maybe if I could understand what was happening, I wouldn't hate it.
One thing that's also important to note is this is like the halfway point ish from the whole Fourth World saga. So at this point, like waist deep in this style. So like. You're not supposed to just read this issue.
I will defend Phil and Daryl's perspective on this. When artists do turn into writers, I think having a writer to read the page and say what the fuck is going on is very important because when they get to the fight scenes, it is impossible to tell who is fighting who. A character enters a fight and they never show her face.
She just says the character's name, and I had to assume Stampa was another person in the fight.
Instead of like a shout or pronunciation.
Yeah, I was like, Stampa is either a war cry from her planet, or it's someone she just threw. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's as someone who reads a lot of like artists, writers, that's a very common thing. You need a writer to look at your work and
this is why generally you need editors like Mark Millar. You need someone to be like, hey, did you think about this?
it obviously feels like someone who's filling in the blanks in their own mind when they're writing, because all people do. You're like, I know what's going on here, therefore everyone will.
Yeah. You need somebody to come in and say, you need a punctuation mark at some point. At some point, for the love of God. But anyway, so it opens with Funky Flash. I'm just going to call him Stanley. Stanley at his mansion. He's waiting for his inheritance. Apparently, the person who gave him his inheritance in his mansion.
I don't get this at all.
Demands that he gets it from a giant statue that opens its mouth and releases money every week or so. And slowly but surely, he's been giving him less and less money. And Roy Thomas is basically like, this is really fucking stupid. Like that, this is how you get your inheritance. And Stanley's like, at least I don't have to work for a living. I'm fucking awesome. I'm Stan fucking Lee. And it's just funny. I wonder if this is a critique on Stanley, because Stanley did get into comics because of nepotism. His uncle worked at Marvel, so I wonder if this is him.
If that was like his uncle as the statue.
Yeah. And I think he's just like collecting money for not doing anything.
I think like that was another kind of hard thing with reading through this. Like Phil and I, with having like no knowledge of the comics industry, is we don't know who like I was able to pick out this with Stan Lee like towards the end, where I'm like, clearly a Stan Lee character isn't coming in. This guy has to be him. So it's just like you're looking for like all these like threads that attach you to reality, but since we don't know the material, the most we got is Stan Lee. So it's like he pulls money out of a mouth. I'm like, okay, I'm sure this is something. There's no way for me to know what.
And that's another good point. That's another reason why Phil and Darryl were fucking screwed. Whenever you get into something that's a critique on the industry, like very in-crowd critique on like specific individual industry, it's always impossible to follow. Like when Taylor Swift and Kanye West start critiquing each other in their songs and shit.
When they start beefing, and you're like, what is this a thing people do?
Yeah, like when you're not in the industry, you don't get the fucking analogies, and they're getting super deep into it, like with anything. Like if you're reading a response to response to response, you're never gonna fucking follow it.
Not to mention that even in the story, it goes from Stan Lee and this guy to fucking Iron Man strapped to a rocket with like a gnome man like as his sidekick, and then it swaps to this barbarian Wonder Woman person like, with a gun, and I'm like, what is happening?
So Mr. Miracle's cast is Mr. Miracle, escape artist, looks kind of like Iron Man, I guess. Oberyn, his very short sidekick.
Yeah.
Is he human?
Yeah.
No way.
Is he human or is he an alien too?
No, he's just short.
He's just short. Okay.
He's like his manager.
He's the Phil from Hercules.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh, pretty much exactly.
Well, I mean, his name was Oberon too.
Yeah. And then his wife, Big Barda, who is just like a big Amazon woman.
Yeah, so...
Oh, that's his wife?
She's the one who made the porno with Superman.
Oh, yes. If you want to go... We discussed this character before. Go check out our Superman porno issue, because John Byrne had Mr. Miracle get cuckolded by Superman, but made a porno with Big Barda.
Guys, I am quitting the podcast. God damn.
So let's finish this issue before we get to that. So the
reason why you're okay with me leaving, you're just like, I just need to finish this.
We just have to finish it. We have to tell this imaginative story. So Stanley's basically like, I'm not getting enough money from my fucking inheritance. I gotta go back to work. I gotta make somebody work for me and mooch off his success. So I'm gonna start looking for someone. I'm gonna get Mr. Miracle to do an escape artist tour for me. And
I had no idea Mr. Miracle was scot-free, too, because they never call him Mr. Miracle. They just call him scot-free all the time.
But yeah, he's scot-free, Mr. Miracle. And, like,
yeah, Phil.
It's like we explained Mr. Miracle, and when he goes to meet, Stanley meets Big Barda first. And I actually thought this was interesting because, like we mentioned, Stanley was incredibly sexist with his 60s comics, like Sue Storm, like Invisible Girl, like they would say like, wow, I feel useless, and everyone would be like, yeah, you are useless, you're a woman, you're there to look pretty and like and give us morale. Like he was like pure sexism.
Yeah, he calls Stompa Chicky all the time. Chicky, calm down, Chicky.
Big Barda's like, Scott and I are independent, you'll have to talk to him. Like, I don't speak for him, he doesn't speak for me. And he's like, that's good, Chicky, that's good, women's lib dialogue. Ooh,
great act. Like, yeah, you can believe that shit. No one believes that. Everyone
yeah, he's clapping.
Chicky, booby baby.
And then he says, yeah, maybe you would be a good act if you had more class. And it's like, ooh.
He says she breaks the gun to like intimidate him, and he still just keeps going on. Chicky, booby baby, did you think for 1 minute that Biddy Buddy Funky would be unkind to you?
This is why we were losing our mind.
And we should clarify, she breaks the gun that he was giving to her to show off, like for no reason. Like we talked about, Kirby does not set up anything properly at all. Like she's just holding a gun saying, this is a cool gun, and then she breaks it. Like, this is a stupid gun. Fuck you, Stanley.
This dialogue really just did kill me though, because like he says that, and then she breaks the gun, and he goes, crazy lady, to rebuild like this, and Why don't you go report to your drill sergeant? You're a classic, Funky. Ego, ignorance, hostility, a real powerhouse. If you'll excuse me, I'll go take a bath. And then the other guy comes in, and I'm like, who am I supposed to know who this is?
And I was thinking, I'm like, is this like because it says a moment later. I'm like, I don't know.
You can't follow this? So Mr. Miracle says, well, you must be Mr. Flashman. Have you been waiting long, sir? And Flashman says, what matter, great wizard, on a day when wondrous feats poise on the brink of creation? What, you can't tell what's going on?
And then Oberon, his sidekick, is there the whole time, and for some reason, every time Mr. Miracle turns around, Funky Flashman starts like kicking him and like grabbing him.
He's not kicking him. He's just trying to hold him, like grab him, like.
He's trying to like chase him away in this panel, and Oberon's like, "How much sugar in your coffee, Mister Flashman? 1 lump or 2?"
But Oberon never says anything about the fact that he's he grabs him by the neck later.
He's having to flee from this man.
There's one panel where it looks like he's shoving Oberon into his pants.
And he says, "Stand, man, be silent and humble in the presence of simple, heartwarming dedication. Thank you, little man." And I don't know, like what. Why wouldn't Oberon respond to this or like?
Oh my God, he is going into his pants.
Yes.
Oberon just don't want it.
Oberon's just like gross. He has an icky face on it, like he's putting in his pants.
Okay, but are we supposed to know why he's like trying to grab this little man?
I think he's just a fucking creep. I guess he's a pervert. I guess maybe I don't know.
But why doesn't Oberon mention anything? I just don't understand.
I think Kirby's just trying to portray Stan Lee that he's just like untrustworthy and wild and like crazy.
Yeah, I guess he's trying to swipe Oberon and put him in his pants.
And just like some of these lines, I'm like trying to follow along. I'm like, okay, he's meeting scot-free here, and then he just comes in and says, "Ah, what a tingly, wingly thrill to actually be in the very setting where the hallowed Thaddeus Brown, like a warlock of ancient yore, conjured up his majestic manipulations." And I'm like, what? What did I get?
Is he any of these words? Scot-free.
Then Scott says, "Oh, so you boned up on Thaddeus." Thaddeus was the original Mr. Miracle that Scott-Free, when he first got to Earth, watched die, and he's like, I guess I'll be Mr. Miracle.
Oh.
So,
not that it matters.
While Mr. Miracle's making a business deal with Stanley to try to get a deal touring as an escape artist, Barda gets attacked in the fucking fight scene. It's impossible to follow by Servants of Apocalypse.
You have to mention their names. Mad Harriet, Stampa, who, again, it doesn't actually show up. She just goes, Stampa, and then she, like, throws something, and then that was Stampa, and then Stampa's gone. And then she's like, I hope Lashina doesn't come, or Bernadette.
I will defend this because, like I mentioned, Stanley, in 60s comics, they're always showing a woman as super weak. I think it's cool, like Big Barda was like a soldier for this evil group, and she was like a part of this female military force, and that military force is hunting her. So this was really progressive for like compared to like Stanley's shit. And
to have like an Amazonian woman.
Yeah, with like army of Amazons being chased by her old colleagues who are all Amazonian
all of
women.
the main, like the head torturer on Apocalypse is a woman, and all of her lieutenants are all women.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like Thanos with his daughters?
Oh yeah, kind of too. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
but that was years later.
Okay.
Yeah, but is this progressive, or is it showing women are evil and torturers?
No, but like Big Barda
But Big Barda's a hero.
Yeah, Big Barda is more badass than Mr. Miracle. Like she kicks everyone's ass.
Mr. Miracle, is he a hero? Because everything he does is just like, look at me, I'm jumping off a cliff, and he explodes, and then he's like,
he's a skateboarder. He's not a fighter. He's a
but like, how is that interesting to watch?
I don't know. It's kind of interesting to see, like, why is Harry Houdini interesting to watch? It's like the
but I would go to see Harry Houdini. I wouldn't want to see him fight supervillains and just like explode himself and be like, I didn't die.
Just reading these random lines, I'm like, I just don't follow anything. Earth isn't small. Perhaps we can lose ourselves in hamlets, cities, continents. Perhaps in time, the forces of Apocalypse will give up the hunt. I get that. And she says, it's a delusion, Scott, but I'll buy it. Only watch Flashman? Megalomaniacs love to make noise. He could be our Achilles heel.
Oh my God, it's like Trump talking.
Well, Trump became president, so maybe this guy is more in tune with the American people than you are,
maybe it's
guys.
something where when, like, if you see Jack Kirby talk, you're like, oh, I understand what you're saying now.
It's just reading it.
Yeah.
No, but like Jack Kirby was like a soft-spoken, gruff guy. He's like the opposite of this.
But yeah, that's the reason why Mr. Miracle teams up with starts working for Stanley, because he wants to stay on the run and away from the people hunting him down. So he's gonna be public as Mr. Miracle doing escape acts while touring the country, I guess. But so that they show off how he can escape stuff, like Phil said, like he can escape a bubble that explodes because he's hiding in the tiniest crevice in the corner. Like that's his superpower to survive anything, like even those bullshit. Like
It's just funny because like every scene of him doing this is like a saw blade coming to him. It cuts through, and then he's just didn't get cut. And Oberon is scared the whole time.
I would read a book about a person escaping stuff, but the problem is he just escaped because saying I escaped.
Yeah, it doesn't show any of him escaping. It's just like he gets in a bubble, it blows up, and he's fine. He's like, yep.
Yeah, I don't like again, Phil. I don't think like you always blame the premise. I don't think it's the premise. I think it's the execution. Like they just say he escaped. They don't show a badass escape.
I mean, also we have Mother Box here, right? Like.
So it's just a literal plot device where it's just this little machine that pings and then does whatever it has to do. That's it.
What do you mean? I couldn't tell what it did. I couldn't tell
makes
what
a
it
does
woman
whatever.
pop out of a thing?
It can open boom tubes so you can teleport. Scott's always like, oh, Motherbox showed me the weakness of this trap and I just escaped. And it's like, okay, good escape artist. You just have a machine that tells you what to do.
Yeah. So he like he's showing off what he can do. So he gives the Motherbox to Stanley, and Stanley keeps it. Like he doesn't. This plot device, the most important thing, he just lets Stanley have it and forgets about it. Oops, I forgot. So now Stanley's a target because Motherbox is how they're targeting them. So Stanley goes back to his manager and he's like, this Motherbox is stupid. He just tosses it away.
Can I just say, I know I was shitting on the all-female team before. It was just the way they were introduced, how this woman is like, I'm going to select a lash that will cut them to ribbons. And she's just covered in like whips and stuff. Yeah. And then as she starts fighting, Barda's like, Lashina, I've been waiting for you. It's like, it just felt so dumb.
I will say Lashina's design is cool. Like, she's like covered.
All of the Kirby designs I think are great.
Like, it's like, remember, this is in the era where it was just Superman guys in tidy whities on their outside their pants.
Yeah, the fact that she had like 3 like belts on her face, I guess.
Yeah, she's like a BDSM kind of costume. Yeah. But like it might seem dumb now, like if it was done now. But this was the '60s when in bright colors. Like I think it's very
like Miracle's outfit himself. He looks pretty wacky.
Yeah, Miracle is like a vomit of colors, green, yellow, and red. Like Lashina's costume, it looks like a modern.
He kind of looks like a gay Iron Man.
He does look like Iron Man. With a Doctor Strange cape.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So Stanley is like, oh, this Motherbox is stupid. We should have this recording device is much better. Everyone can hear my dulcet tones with it. I love the sound of my own voice. This is great. All the women show up and they're like, we don't know who this fucking loser is, but he must be friends with Mr. Miracle to have his box.
And then just like Phil and Darryl, he says, what are all these crazy looking broads doing here?
But before that, Stanley is so engrossed with his own voice that Roy Thomas is like, Stan, these women are coming to kill you, and they're like bragging, like, we're gonna murder this guy. They're like talking out in the open, and Stanley's like, shut up, Roy Thomas, I don't hear you. I'm just listening to the great fucking sound of my own voice in this radio. I love my voice.
My Farron knife will penetrate dimensionally and barbecue him from the inside.
It's just like looks like a dart coming out of like a TV remote.
Exactly. Yeah. Where does it go? She shoots it and just where does it go?
What happens is Stanley finally notices and he's like, oh shit, he's throwing an interdimensional dart at me. I gotta toss Roy Thomas as a human shield in front of it. And he tosses Roy Thomas and it explodes. And he's like, and the whole building explodes too. And Stanley gets out of the building and escapes of time. He should be the fucking scot-free, am I right? So he escapes and he's like, I guess I'm gonna quit working with scot-free. His friends are too crazy. Too bad Roy Thomas died, but whatever. I can get a new kiss ass any day. And it just turns out that Roy Thomas somehow survived. Mr. Miracle is just like, a good thing I saved him just in time. As a dart was flying towards him in like a split second, I managed to come in here, arrive at this location, and save him just in time.
It wasn't just the dart coming at him and then he showed up. It was they had time to turn around. He picked up Roy Thomas, threw him at the dart, and then this guy showed up and saved him.
We don't know how many dimensions it traveled through. It could be a lot. He could have time.
Yeah. Sure. So that's the fucking worst thing Darryl and Phil ever read.
Pros-wise.
So
Pros-wise.
No, like every-wise.
I think I like fucking Machina's costume. I think it's fucking badass.
I like a costume's the saving grace for this.
Hey guys, did you know that I think the Mr. Miracle book is the most accessible of the Jack Kirby books?
Yeah, okay.
I gotta make you guys read a fucking issue of Forever People.
You know what?
That's something.
That kind of makes sense because it's like saying like Ultimates is the most approachable Millar book.
Oh, okay.
Where it's like someone reading it the first time, it's like, that's crazy, but you have to dig in deeper to see the worst stuff.
Okay, so let's get into another unapproachable book, Adam Warlock. So this, like we said, Marvel wanted their own version of what Jack Kirby was doing, and that was Thanos. And part of the Thanos arc was Adam Warlock. So this is a part of a part story.
Oh my god.
Now, this is written and drawn by Jim Starlin, who we've covered the last 2 episodes.
Yep. What's nice is that Starlin tries to catch you up, and there's one page where Adam Warlock gives you the rundown, and there's a lot of things happening, including my favorite thing, a giant face with 4 stubby arms and 4 legs, and he has a rock beard that leads in a rock unibrow, and
it's like formations of rock. He's like a rock.
It's a graveler.
He's a graveler. It's fucking graveler.
I thought it was pretty cool, but that's probably why.
But with bug eyes.
I think it's cool too. I like it.
And then when Adam Warlock tries to steal his soul, it drives him mad, like that little bug man.
I will defend that style. Jim Starlin, we talk about aliens looking the same. Jim Starlin goes crazy with alien design.
This reminds me a lot of just Doctor Strange stuff.
Perfect, because that one of those things was. This art style was Jim Starlin emulating Doctor Strange. Because,
he says the story's dedicated to Steve Ditko,
who gave us for all a different reality. So it was an homage to Steve Ditko, which is important because Steve Ditko co-created Stanley, like we talked about.
He co-created Stanley.
He fathered Stanley. He went back in time. He co-created Doctor Strange.
That's what I'm gonna call people who have kids now. You co-created this.
It's true.
I'm sorry. I keep saying co-created. This isn't Stanley. I'm going to slur my words. I'm fucking drunk. I'm sorry.
Jim Starlin had a run of Mr. Miracle.
Oh, he did?
He killed him. Yeah, he did Death of the New Gods.
Oh, yeah, he killed everyone. Starlin was like, fuck you, Jack Kirby, gonna one-up me. I'm gonna kill all your characters. He fucking literally did that.
This is sounding more and more petty as you're revealing this information.
But yeah, let me get back to it. So Doctor Strange was like a really trippy book. People, college students were like, whoa, man, this is trippy shit. And they'll read it while getting high. And he eventually quit Marvel because he couldn't stand Stanley's censorship. And this issue is basically Jim Starlin saying, I can't stand Stanley's censorship. I'm fucking quitting. I'm going to give him an homage to the real creative talent, Steve Ditko. Stanley's a fucking hack, basically. And just to kind of speed up on the story, so Adam Warlock was basically a god-like figure. In this story, what it's about, the Starlin's version, he basically found out that in the future, literally from the future, he meets his future self, and his future self says, I remember this exact moment. He becomes pure evil. He takes over the universe. So he's inevitably going to become evil, and from what you can tell, there's no way to stop it. Everything he seems to do seems to get him more onto the path of becoming evil. And the story, basically the story of him...
Cool.
Yeah, I was about to say that's so interesting.
Yeah, and then I'm sitting there, I'm like, this just puts more points in Starlin's corner for cool stuff.
Yeah, that's why I want to clarify, because he wants to tell a story about basically what his story is building towards is he's going to eventually become evil, and stories him grappling reality. The only solution for him to kill himself, and he has to find a way to do that because he's like a god, like a being.
I was about to say, if at some point you just kill yourself, right?
But he can't. That's the problem. And so
this whole run is fantastic. I highly recommend it.
So this is a really dark story.
This is my least favorite issue of the whole run.
This is the worst. This is the worst story arc. The issue of the story of the arc. This is a commentary issue, like we said. Fuck you, commentary issue.
It's no just weird to take this pit stop in the middle of the serious story and be like, who I really don't like, Stanley.
Yeah. So the story opens with a narration because it turns out that he got captured by the church that his evil future self created, and his evil future self is now trying to brainwash him to speed up the process of him becoming evil. And have control over him when he becomes evil. So they put him on a VR reality, which looks like a trippy Steve Goes Doctor Strange world, and it's filled with clowns. And they're like, "Hey!"
Yeah, I'm like, I thought this was so strange at first because I'm like, you're trying to
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I thought you were trying if you're trying to control someone, you're like do it through clowns. But then it's like they say later how it's like his perception is seeing them as clowns.
Yeah, because they're trying to show their worldview, saying, "Come to our worldview. We're trying to give order to the universe." But he's like, "This is fucking stupid. You're a bunch of clowns." So he's reacted to it by viewing them as clowns.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, and so the clowns, the light clown's called Len Tien. Lens Tien, which is an anagram for Stan Lee. And he says,
I was wondering if there were going to be anagrams in this.
Yeah, and he says, "Welcome to the
land of the way it is."
Exactly, and he's just like, we're going to show you how things really are. No more misconceptions. You could be happy now. You're making everything so dark and gloomy. We're going to make you everything happy and show how to be happy.
And I like, too, that it's because some of the other ones, maybe not the last one, but the Ape and Angel one really hit hard that it's look, it's literally Stanley, they draw it like him. Whereas this is a clown with a round face and he's bald and he's got the red hair pointing out in the back. And the way that you know it's Stanley. It's both the anagram and he says, "Take it easy, true believer," and then that's all that Starlin does to be like, this is very clearly Stanley.
Yeah. You know what's crazy?
This clown, this issue.
I'm reading the trade right now. I'm looking at the trade. They changed the spelling to just be Lentine. They take the S out so it's not an anagram anymore.
But so Lentine shows him to a person's gonna give him his new face, saying, "We're gonna put a happy smile on your face. Let's put a smile on your face." And this was before the Joker, so that was only happy contagions back then. And everything must go. We gotta make you just happy. So he gets his artist, who's a kind of like a painter's costume on, Jan Harroom, which is an anagram for John Romita, who was the head artist for Spider-Man. Like if you see a 60s Spider-Man comic, it's John Romita.
It's either Romita or Ditko.
I should have known these were anagrams because their names are so weird. Like
Jan Hat-Roomy?
Yeah, so Jan takes his paintbrush and paints a clown face under Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock is like a god, like a gold Adonis basically, and he paints a clown face on his face.
It's pretty funny looking.
Yeah, and he's just like, and Adam Warlock immediately rubs it off, saying, "I know I may be like dark and disturbed, but everything that makes me interesting, it makes me who I am. I can't cover it up." And it's basically this is like a whole analogy about how Stanley didn't like how he was telling all these dark stories with Adam Warlock, and he should be telling happy stories about Spider-Man having trouble going to college and doing his job while being Spider-Man at the same time, like all these wacky stories.
I like, too, that they have the clown go, sure, have it, Adam, have it your way. We'll not force you to do anything. We're not tyrants here. Like, I can imagine that Stanley told this to him at one point.
Yeah, if you want to make things hard for yourself, go right ahead.
Yeah. And this is interesting because it's relevant now, because this is basically what people could bitch about the Marvel Studios films, where they're too light, they're too fluff, they're all happy, and that's very true to Stanley's vision. And the first film to really break that tone was Infinity War, which is a Starlin story. Which is interesting. Like
true,
yeah. So like they break it with Starlin broke it in the 70s, and now Starlin's story broke of the movies. Meanwhile, this is the first appearance of Gamora, by the way, like the second appearance of Gamora.
Yeah, I was like, who's this fishnet woman with her like midriff showing, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm Gamora." I'm like, "Oh wow, what a change."
Well, she's green. So.
You're missing the real star, which is Gamora's sidekick, Pip the Troll.
I actually thought he was pretty funny.
I like Pip.
he because they're threatening someone, and he's like, "I'm gonna get you" or whatever, and then the guy's like, "Oh God, Gamora," and he's like, "Herb, listen, I'm the one you should be scared of," and he breaks his gun, and then as they're talking, he's like, "A fucking gun."
Yeah, he breaks it by accident, by the way. Like, oops.
It's pretty funny.
He's Rocket Raccoon before Rocket Raccoon. Like,
he really is. Wow.
Yeah. While they're trying to rescue Adam Warlock from his prison, Lentine is showing more. And here's how Starlin viewed Roy Thomas, which is more sympathetic. So a bunch of clowns are pelting a guy on the cross with fucking.
That makes sense. So this is okay.
With pies, and the pies melt away. And you can see Roy Thomas, like he was in the Jack Kirby, a goofy guy with glasses. And they say like, "Oh," and Mark's like, "Who's this guy? Who's this guy you're pelting with pies all the time?" And he's like, "Oh, he was trying to buck the system. He was trying to question the way things are." And Roy Thomas is like, "I played the game as long as I could. I just couldn't take it anymore. You wouldn't understand." And basically what happened was Roy Thomas became editor after Stan Lee, and basically he couldn't take it anymore, and he eventually quit. And this is basically how Starlin basically viewed him. He basically viewed like Roy Thomas as the only good editor, and he viewed the guys that came after Marv Wolfman and
Jim Shooter.
Not Jim Shooter. Yeah, he hated Jim Shooter too, but he hated everyone except Roy Thomas basically.
That's interesting how like in this Roy Thomas is seen as like almost like a martyr. Like he died trying to play the game as long as he could. Whereas like in the last one we read that he was just like a brown noser the whole time.
Well, for what it's worth, when Mr. Miracle was written, Roy Thomas was still the editor.
Yeah.
So
he probably
yeah.
Adam Warlock is still like, this is all stupid. What the fuck? Like you guys are clowns. But then the final coup de grace on this thing being ultimate form of stupid is he finds out what they're building towards, and they're all building towers of garbage.
I like this.
Yeah, and there's like just giant towers of trash, and he's like, "What the?" Adam Warlock's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, he keeps going, "Why?"
Yeah. Like, why? And he's like,
all those clowns will be killed
when the trash falls over.
Yeah.
This is what they've always done and always will do.
Yeah.
We started building trash, so we have to keep building trash.
Yeah. Life is a cycle. You always end up where you start, no further. And Adam Warlock looks through the trash after it collapses and starts killing a bunch of clowns. And he looks at the trash and he finds that there's diamonds in there. And he's like, there's diamonds in this trash. And he's like, oh, and then Stan's like, oh, that stuff. We just can't keep it out of our refuse. Someone keeps putting it, we're not looking. Like, what the fuck? Adam Warlock basically goes to sing, starts laughing and saying, diamonds among the garbage, let me out of here.
I just love the idea of a comic book writer being like, all these writers, all they do is they keep making this trash and occasionally they'll make like good stories.
Yeah.
Like, it's a pretty ballsy move to say this about your own industry.
Yeah, this is made by Marvel. This is printed under Marvel.
Yeah.
So he's like, I gotta get out of here. Tell me how to get out of here. And he's like, the only way to get out of here is basically go insane. You gotta go through the doorway of madness.
I felt kind of bad for Starlin with this. I'm like, wow, he must have gone through some stuff trying to write for Marvel.
Yeah. So Starlin eventually goes to not Starlin, Adam Warlock. Stand for Starlin. Finally reaches the doorway of madness, and the madness monster comes out, and just like this big buff guy, he's like, I'm a madness monster. He starts fighting it, but he's like, you can't fight me. I'm madness incarnate. I have no soul. You can't steal my soul or anything like that. And he's like, the only way to beat me is to embrace me. Fear me and I'll destroy you. Come to terms with me and you shall be invincible. and Morlock looks at him and he's like, you're right. You've always been with you, but I denied you. And he's just like, you're neither demon or angel. You're merely a different point of view. No more than a different point of view, a different reality. And finally, he breaks the VR machine himself. Like, it breaks on its own without Gamora and Pip breaking it. And they arrive just in time to see that. And he's like, I'm insane, guys. I fucking insane. Stanley made me fucking insane, guys. And he's like, but this is good though. Now that I'm insane, I can't go evil because I wasn't insane before. And I wasn't evil before. Now I'm insane. I can't go evil. And his evil future self shows up saying, "You fucking idiot. You are evil. Like, you're becoming me already." And he shows up in his full body saying, "Now embrace me. You're evil now, just like me. Evil and insane." And that's part of the grand story arc that Starlin was building.
Oh boy!
Thanks, Stanley.
Oh man, that was awesome.
Mountains of garbage.
Yeah. So, a question: how did you guys view Stanley before, and how do you view him now? Like, knowing how his closest workers wrote this shit about him.
Well, it's hard because I feel like sometimes the environment can be so toxic that I don't know.
Maybe capitalism is a toxic system. We live in a male patriarchy that encourages bad behavior. Maybe that. I don't know.
See, I like Stanley a lot as a creator, but like, even though he seems so nice, based on every testimony from people that works with him, I think he's like a real shitty businessman and a shitty boss.
I want to say, when me and Ryan went through, the Marvel chronologically at different times, but we both had similar reactions to it. When Stanley transitions from writer to editor, they became incredibly bland, incredibly shitty. I think he's just a really bad editor. Like, he knows what he can do well, but he waters down everyone else's style.
But like, there are some Stanley books that I still think like hold up fantastic. Like, I think his Silver Surfer is fantastic still, but like.
We should talk to Roy Thomas, but a lot of the worst Roy Thomas stuff is him writing under Stanley, writing very specific Stanley stuff.
Yeah, but like, how many creators have to come out to be like, this guy's a shithead who stole my work? Yeah. For you to, like, I think like one is enough to listen to, but when it's like dozens,
and it's like the people you made your biggest works with, like Jack Kirby, like anyone you can credit, any work you can credit to Stanley, you can credit to Jack Kirby almost.
What do you think, Phil?
I didn't have much of an opinion on him before, but. Besides that, he's the Marvel guy.
But even like he's just the guy who created Spider-Man, and this guy, like, even if it's just a neutral opinion, that's still
that's what I had of him. And now I'm like I mean, like Darryl said, like, there's always the possibility that like a lot of people just don't like their boss because of the nature of it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like, if everyone doesn't like that boss might suck.
Yeah,
especially if everyone's like, this guy's full of himself. You're like, that's probably the truth.
Yeah, especially if it's the same complaints throughout. Like, I should mention, when I talked about Stan Bragg signing his art, in the Marvel, in the era before the 60s stuff, Stanley really signed the covers, and that's usually done by the artist. So he would literally sign what the artist should be signed to make it seem like maybe it wasn't his intention, but it makes it seem like he drew the covers.
For what it's worth, at the time, writers weren't credited at all. So I don't. That's tough because it's like, he was doing it to be full of himself, but he's also like one of the first comic creators to give writers credit, even though it was himself. It's still an important step.
Well, that's the thing. Like, and that's why I talk about like never meet your heroes, because they're always like shitty histories, especially when it comes to businesses and stuff like that. Like I could tell you early history of Gary Gygax and his creators that he worked with. It's all them screwing each other over. The only reason we have D&D editions is because everyone kept trying to screw each other out of the royalties, so they'll print no editions so they wouldn't have to give royalties to the previous writers. That's the only reason why we have D&D editions, so people can screw out of royalties.
Wow.
That's so funny.
And that's pretty much unanimous. Like we talked about Steve Jobs taking credit for everyone who worked under him. Bill Gates made his career acquiring and eating up smaller companies and taking all their achievements. We can talk about Facebook. We can talk about all these creators. Pretty much when you talk about capitalism, it's always about someone exploiting somebody else.
Follow our other podcast, Oops, I Talk Politics, if this interests you and you're not turned off by this talk.
So that show is, like all the other shows on the network, available at the flyingmachine.network website. And so all the other shows are great too, but this week I want to mention Tales from the Static, which is in the middle of their new season, and it's been really great. And Ryan has a lot of cool stuff going on, and I don't know how much longer he has in the season, but definitely for the next couple weeks. So definitely check out
He has a lot of diversity between stuff where he pulls from like childhood memories of things.
Yeah.
Like even like things you get in Serial. Like that was the centerpiece of like one episode.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is kind of like neat if you really like nostalgia and like kind of horror that's not like grotesque or gory.
Yeah. And so yeah, check Tales from the Static out and all the other shows at flyingmachine.network. And as always, support the Patreon, patreon.com/flyingmachine, and you can hear lots of bonus episodes from us. So while we're on the topic of Patreon, I want to give a special thank you shout out to superfan Tracy, our superest fan, for being a donor.
Tracy! What is that?
It's an air horn.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a vuvuzela that I bought
That's what I thought it was.
Just for this special occasion. So thank you very much, Tracy. We really, really appreciate it.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, by the time this comes out, I think I have a blog post up at the Flying Machine website. So check that out too. I finished writing it. I haven't published it yet, but by the time this comes out, it should be out. So
by the time this comes out, he'll take the extra effort to just publish it. Right?
I talk about the new Decemberist album and how it made me pull over on the side of the road to just cry because I'm so sad because we're in Trump's America, and it's good. But
whatever.
shit,
I got a fucking album.
Yeah,
fucking that reaction.
And so check all that stuff out and rate and review and subscribe on iTunes and all that jazz. And yeah, that's all I got. Take us away, Sly.
Thank you all for listening to Divisive Issues. I've been going insane to prevent myself from going evil.
I've been always punching my dialogue up with exclamation points.
I've been stuffing a little manager into my pants.
God damn it.
Tower of Trash. Somebody do Tower of Trash, please.
Oh,
Please,
and I've been constructing a tower of trash that's gonna fall on Sly.
Stank continuity.